Hello, moon watchers and stargazers, and welcome to another episode of the Compendium Cast. I am your host, Jason Ashcraft. Theme music.
Theme music.
I am joined once again by Carlos Alvarez, and we are touching on Frankenstein from 1931. How are you, Carlos?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. How you doing?
Doing good. I'm excited
Yeah?
for this one.
A little more exciting than Trip to the Moon, I would think, right?
Yeah, it's done almost 3 decades later. And actually I had some fun things to say about that. Just sort of watching a film from 1902 and then 1931, because these are still considered classics to us, and still very primitive in the cinema world.
Sure.
But even just watching the two back to back, you see such growth in both of them and how things were done. And I hadn't seen this movie in a long time. It's actually a really good movie. I thought really well done.
Yeah.
What are your initial thoughts?
So I mean, to be fair, full transparency, I'm not the biggest fan of like the classic black and white Universal monster movies. I like them, but I'm not it's not the kind of thing where I have multiple viewings, every couple of years or something. Like I don't revisit the old Bela Lugosi and the old Wolfman and Boris Karloff and Frankenstein, but still a great movie and definitely worth a watch if you've never seen it. And even if you have seen it, it's worth a rewatch. So that's my thoughts.
They're good comfort background movies when you just need to throw something on.
Sure.
Like they're not something I'm gonna, unless I'm doing it for like this, where I need to like actually focus on it.
Yeah, you got to do homework. They're great.
Yeah.
They're great. I mean, you wouldn't know anything about this, but they're great hangover movies.
I believe that though, because that's what I mean. Is like there's something when I was like, I just want something on.
Yeah,
you don't.
They're
all really short.
Yep.
Yeah. I just want something on, throw it on in the background. Like I did go through a phase, and I got like as many of them as I could get, and I was just watching. But I wasn't like watching; they were just on. But I'm with you. Like they're not a favorite, and I guess this is a good point of us to say we're doing this movie specifically. Not even so much for the movie itself, but because the novel can be debated as one of the first science fiction stories. So I thought it'd be fun to tackle here and talk about that. But anyways, it won't be normal to get like classic horror films on here, but this one felt special for the theme. Cast overview, right? The director, James Well. It's based on Mary Shelley's novel Frankenstein, or The Modern Prometheus, which came out in 1818. Starring Boris Karloff as the monster, also famously known as Imhotep in the classic The Mummy, and many, many other things. The dude's done a lot of stuff. Interesting thing I noticed when watching the movie, though, is when they do the opening credits of Frankenstein, it says the monster with a question mark. So Boris wasn't actually credited. I imagine that was on purpose. They wanted the mystery of the monster, right?
Well, that was like the same thing with Halloween, right? Michael Myers wasn't actually credited,
right?
It was the shape.
It's
so like they never actually credited him, as a character name or something,
right? Well, yeah, because he's just called the monster, but even the actor, because I'm pretty sure the actor was credited for Michael Myers, right? Maybe not.
Probably, yeah, actually, yeah, I think he was. Yeah.
Yeah. So this was more like
I gave like a total bullshit analogy. Yeah.
okay. Fair enough.
It's funny.
Colin Clive
I'm
as
tired
Dr.
too, all right.
Colin Clive as Dr. Henry Frankenstein, May Clark as Elizabeth Lavenza, who is the fiance to Henry, Dwight Fry as Fritz, or in other iterations known as Igor. Not this one though.
No, it's
and then
pronounced Igor.
Igor. Oh, my bad.
No. Young
Edward.
Frankenstein.
Oh, that's good. That's a good movie.
Frankenstein. Now it's pronounced Igor.
Edward von Sloan as Dr. Woldman. So those are like the big hitters. There's other characters we'll talk about, but those are the ones that are pretty frequent. So this had a budget of $262,000 and grossed $12 million. So
what is that adjusted for inflation?
That's what I'm saying. So for 1931, that was probably crazy.
12 million, 31. Yeah, that was probably like 80 million bucks or something more.
Yeah, off just 262,000, which again, that was probably closer to $1 million back then.
I would say probably more like 5 million.
Makeup artist was Jack Pierce. I just want to give a shout out to him because a lot of the makeup in this movie is really great, and obviously Frankenstein is such an iconic look in horror,
Sure.
So you got to give credit where it's due, man.
Absolutely.
Synopsis pretty simple. Dr. Henry Frankenstein, he becomes obsessed with sort of creating life, the idea of playing God. Leading to his creation of what is just called the monster.
Yes.
And then the struggles between the two, and leading to a lot of chaos and tragedy. All right, let's get into the movie. Okay. We start with actually sort of like not an overture. I guess you can call it an overture. An opening scene. The film begins with the actor Edward von Sloan, who plays Dr. Woldman in the film. He comes out breaking the fourth wall and directly addressing the audience and just kind of warning them of the movie they're about to see, as sort of like, it's going to be shocking, it's going to be scary. Don't say we didn't warn you. Apparently this was added after test screenings. They needed something to warn the audience what they're going to be prepared for. I guess after a bunch of test screenings, people were like, oh my God, I wonder if it has to do with a certain scene. I don't know. And so this was added after the film. And it's just funny because like we watch it now and it's so tame to what we have, but times are different. So then we get to like the first scene of the movie. We open up to a funeral scene. So someone's getting buried, as funerals do, right? It's foggy, it's dark, it's kind of setting the tone. And we see, this is where we get the first glimpse of Fritz and Henry Frankenstein sort of hiding behind this fence in the graveyard. So the two are kind of waiting, and then after the gravedigger buries the casket, he lights a pipe, walks away. The two creep up and they start undigging, right? So essentially here we're seeing they're stealing bodies, right?
Yes. Grave robbing,
exactly. Henry sets up the casket and he says, he looks at it as like, just resting, waiting for a new life to come. As they're moving away with the casket, they come to a hanged man. So in 1931, where was it still common to just like have people hung just out in the open?
But the movie doesn't. The book itself is from the 1800s.
Oh, duh.
And the movie's an adaptation of it, so.
There it is. Yeah.
As far as I know, it's in Germany.
Okay.
Because Frankenstein is he's Swiss, but then he's living in Germany, and or he lived in Switzerland, but he was studying in Germany.
Right.
And so and actually, I've actually been to Castle Frankenstein. So. Oh,
really?
Yeah, like the actual legit. Yeah, like in the Black Forest region and stuff in Germany. My ex-girlfriend was from like right there. So
yeah. So you just got to thank for the German women, huh?
What's that?
So you just got to thank for those German women.
I don't know what you're talking about. I have no knowledge of what you speak, sir.
Yeah. So they cut down this
it's coincidental. Okay, that's all I can say.
All right.
But but I've been there, so I'm pretty sure the story itself, at least a portion of it, takes place in Germany.
Okay.
But if I remember,
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, his character was actually Swiss. or
It makes so much sense because later in the movie, when there's like the big wedding celebration and the dances and stuff they're playing is very German,
sure.
or very Swiss.
Yeah.
Um,
Like I said, I think
it's definitely European.
I think that the home base, if you will, is in Switzerland. But I believe when he's like studying and then he's doing his experiments, I think that's like all taking place in Germany.
So they come upon this hanged man and they cut him down because they need a brain, right?
Right.
And Henry explains that this brain's no good. It's been the way he says it is like the neck was damaged, so the brain's not good. I'm sure. Yeah. So no brain for him. Yeah. But then we go to the scene where we get introduced to Dr. Welland for the first time.
Or like an F sound, Dr. Foltman.
Yeah, actually.
It's probably because they're doing it with a German accent.
Oh, man. Carlos is the German expert.
Well, I know not of what you speak, sir. And I'm just saying, like I got, when the wife starts going off on a rant or something, she'll start chomping on her W's too. So
fair enough.
Yeah, so that's if you got somebody named like Waldman, it's probably like Voltman or Foldman or something. Waldman.
Right. So I will continue to say Waldman because I'm an ignorant American.
Well, I believe in you.
Thank
Give
you.
It a shot.
Thank you. Yeah.
Try it. You can try it.
Waldman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
About as good as I can do.
Nice.
Yeah.
We did that. We got there.
There you go. We are German now.
We get introduced to Dr. Waldman, and he is giving a class at his university talking about the brain. And we see Henry and Fritz peeking through a window. And he's talking about normal brain and abnormal brain. I don't know how much scientific proof there is to all this stuff, but that's the whole idea is one of the brains was from like a murderer in life. And he's trying to figure out like what makes this man tick, Funny enough, I didn't think about it till just now, but there's a few parallels in this movie version, but not really. And maybe I'm just noticing, but there's a few parallels to like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And like with this, the normal brain, the abnormal brain, what makes good, what makes evil, And later on, there's another thing that I just thought was kind of silly. It really isn't that big a deal, but it also made me think of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. But later on in the evening, as the class is over, Fritz sneaks in to steal the normal brain because they want the good brain, But he gets spooked by a sound, drops it on the ground, so he has to take the abnormal brain. And this will obviously play a factor later. So then we cut to a scene where we're finally introduced to Elizabeth and this guy Victor, who is Henry's friend, I believe, something like that. But he completely, totally, absolutely wants to bang Elizabeth. So I don't know how much of a friend he is. But we cut to a scene of them talking because she got a letter from Henry where she's very concerned about the contents of the letter. He's trying to tell her like, don't worry about me. I'm doing my work, but they're supposed to be getting married and she hasn't seen him in forever. So the two of them decide to go see him, or to go see Dr. Waldman and talk to him about Frankenstein. And this is where Victor kind of like tries to shoot a shot with her, and she just like laughs it off, like, "Oh, Victor, ha ha ha, let's go find Henry." So this was the other thing that made me think of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, because it's the same idea of like the mad scientist is engaged, but the friend wants the girl. So again, it was just a similar sort of setup to that, but it doesn't really go anywhere in this movie. So I don't know what it was for, because this is the only moment in which Victor actually like tries anything, and then the rest he's just a cool dude looking out for Henry.
So not to really interrupt with that, but that is different than the book.
Frankenstein's name was changed to Henry in
the movie. Yeah. I'm trying to, I'm following you, but I'm also like, when you're going like really deep into the movie parts of it, my brain is still going like this, but the book. So I'm trying to like remember if I'm remembering it correctly.
Oh yeah. Well, don't worry, because remember, I do a segment at the end called book to movie, and we'll
Got it.
discuss all that, baby.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it's like in Bram Stoker's Dracula, right? They switched Mina and Lucy around,
yep, yeah,
right? Like, what was the point?
which,
Or no. Actually, they did that correct, right?
yeah,
But it was the Frank Langella one. They switched them around. It was Lucy and Mina. Mina's the one that gets killed, and Lucy's the one that Dracula's after and stuff. Which was like totally different from the other versions. But anyway, we're not. This isn't Dracula. It's Frankenstein. Go. Sorry, man, dude. You woke me up, so we're going to the club, okay? And you're getting every fucking random stream of consciousness thought that fucking.
That's all right. That's all right. Yeah.
That's how it works. This is what you wanted. This. Here it is.
Yeah. Where even was I, bro?
I ganked you, didn't I?
You sure did. All right. So the two decide to go see Dr. Waldman.
Yes.
So he explains that Henry has sort of been consumed and changed by his work, and he hasn't seen him in a while, and explained that he had come to Henry had come to him asking, for help in his experiments, and he sort of denied him because it was getting a little too weird for him. And this is when Victor was kind of like, well, surely experimenting on some animals isn't that bad. And this is where we get the reveal, like, no, he wanted to work on people. Mm-hmm. And this was supposed to be a big, like, oh, fuck. He explains his desire to destroy and create life. So I kind of took these two scenes, by the way, because they really sort of took you out of what was going on with Henry and Fritz. I felt these were more for the audience to sort of this is almost giving the background, painting the picture of what's going on, because both these scenes are super short, and it's almost like just hand feeding you, like, this is why he's stealing a dead body, that's how the scenes felt to me, because they literally serve the only purpose, and then it's like, well, let's go find Henry, and then we're like back into the thick of it all.
Movies back then, I mean, film was expensive as shit, still is, but back then they made a habit of trying to find the absolute quickest way from A to B in like a story or a scene or something like that to get a point across.
Right.
So that's why a lot of times it seems like it's like you get like this random scene that's kind of like inserted, and then it just like, you're like, oh, okay, where did that like it'll cut off in the middle of a conversation, and you're like, and so they do that a lot. Yeah.
Because that's exactly how these two scenes felt to me too, because we're seeing all this setup with Henry and Fritz, and then just out of nowhere, here's Elizabeth with a letter,
right,
conveniently explaining everything of why she shouldn't be worried, but she is worried. And then, because it was funny too, because Victor's like, I'll go talk to the professor, and then she's just like, I'm coming with you. So we're like setting up all this stuff so quickly, and then all that and talking to the professor is all under like 2 minutes. Like, it's just so quick. But it's just sort of setting things up, because now we get to, again, now it feels like we're back in the story. We're at the laboratory of
laboratory.
Yeah. And Fritz is up on the roof, and they're setting things up, and this stuff all looks really cool too. So shout out to Kenneth Strickfaden, who made all the electrical equipment and designed that whole scene. And I was reading too that this was the kind of the first time of like the mad scientist look in Hollywood films that would later sort of influence all other sort of mad scientists, right?
Yep.
So good job, Kenneth. You did it, man.
Yeah.
So Fritz is up on the roof, Henry's below getting preparations. He talks about how it's the perfect storm, and soon the electric secrets of heaven will be revealed. So this was funny to me too. I actually didn't think about it just now, but there's a few moments in this movie where he says a lot of like, the electricity of heaven, or refers to God and stuff. So this was still very much where like God and science was very infused in like
it was like a lot of crossover.
Yeah. So it's like he's doing all this, but it's still God's work, know. Shout out to the scientists, baby. Henry talks about the body. Look, there's no blood, there's no decay. And then the final touch of the brain of a dead man waiting to live again in a body that I made with my own hands. So definitely some God complex going on here.
Yeah, definitely a God complex going on. Yeah. It's the whole, that's kind of like it's kind of like the underlying theme of it, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, and that's how it plays into like actual science fiction, because it's, again, real science fiction is always kind of a cautionary tale. Like, that's why you shouldn't. That's the province of God. You shouldn't. You're just a person. You shouldn't be doing that, because God is infallible and you're human. So therefore, you know what I mean? You're not perfect. So you aren't in a position to be trying to create something if you're not ready to deal with the consequences of it, which is where the movie eventually goes.
So he's like, 15 minutes, the storm will be ready, which is just enough time for this next scene to play out. He gets a knock on the door. And, we, the audience, we know who it is. So he tells Fritz to go. He's like, send them away. Like, we can't be bothered right now. And it's Elizabeth, Victor, and Waldman, Fritz originally denies them, but when they yell up to the window, Henry realizes Elizabeth is there. So he lets them in. But he's like, please, you need to go away. Just trust me, just for tonight. My experiment's almost complete. But then Victor jumps in and calls him crazy. And then this is where, Henry now takes this personal. Like, the face changes and he's like, I'll fucking show you crazy, So he invites them all up into the lab, tells them to sit down. He tells Victor, like, a moment ago you said I was crazy. Tomorrow we'll see about that. And he starts talking to Waldman that he found. So I kind of got lost in this one, and I'll admit I didn't feel like going back and dissecting it, because he talks to Waldman about how, like you said, that something about like the highest color was ultraviolet or something. They were talking about ultraviolet being like the highest color or something about colors. But he's like, but I found another one, the secret to life. And I was kind of lost on how, like, what do colors have to do with the secret? But whatever, I couldn't be bothered. Basically, he's telling him he found the secret of life, and that's what needed to be taken away. So I didn't feel like finding the color analogy thing.
I think they did that because in the book, I think there was something other than electricity that they alluded to as being kind of like the secret sauce was.
There was, yeah. So the electricity thing is, as we'll talk about, is for the movie. Yeah.
Right. But also, like, what you're saying, like with the color thing, that was like kind of like narratively their way of maybe touching on that or something.
So he tells him about how he kept a heart alive for 3 days, and now he's ready to move on to essentially human trials. And he explains the body that he has found, or made, that he made. He's very proud that he made it, and he's going to bring it to life. And that was a big thing too, because I don't know if it's this scene or a later scene, but they accuse him of like destroying a life and bringing, and then destroying life essentially. And he makes it a big point to be like, I didn't destroy anything. I built this from bodies I took. So in his mind, it's like, because he took all these random parts and made this body, he doesn't see it as like destroying life. He's like, this never lived. This is a combination of many body parts together. So I created this,
Right.
So storm grows. It's time they lift it up, and they lift up the body, right, to bring it out into the electricity storm. And then they lower it back down, and that's all it takes, man. That's all it took, and then this is where we get the scene. So we should mention, like, the body's on a slab covered up by a sheet with, one hand's laying out. So when they bring it back down, the hand starts to slowly move, and this is where we get the iconic "it's alive," and he starts screaming and freaking out and goes completely, maniacal. Is that a word?
Maniacal.
Maniacal. Thank you. And he says, in the name of God, now I know what it feels like to be God. So again, right, the theme of the movie, and it's just, I laugh at this part though, because as they say that, he's got the I've gone insane look in his eyes, and the two men come grab him like, we must restrain this man. So again, clearly the mad scientist kind of look, Then we cut scenes, kind of bring the tone down a little bit, to we meet his father, Baron Frankenstein, and now he's getting upset. He's getting worried, like, where the hell has Henry been? And Elizabeth and Victor are trying to calm him down, because they all know what's going on now with the monster, and they're all trying to help him sort of keep it under wraps, I guess. And it's this part made me laugh though, because Baron's like so sure that it's like another woman, even though it's Elizabeth here. who's telling him like, no, it's all good. He's like, no, it's another woman, and you're helping him like cover it up.
Yeah, I think it's probably more like the sensibilities at a time, and kind of like the way they decide to steer things in a certain direction because of the audience that they know they're playing to.
Right.
So that would have been something that would have been like, for that time period, that audience, it would have been like, oh yeah, I can relate to why this guy's thinking that or getting freaked out over it or something like that.
Yeah, because he's wondering like what's going on with the wedding. Why isn't it happening? Where has he been? Then this guy called the Burgomaster comes in.
Burgermeister.
The Burgomaster.
Yeah, the Burgermeister.
Yeah. What do you know about him? Because I couldn't really figure out much. Is he like the mayor? Who is he?
Burgermeister just means basically like mayor.
Gotcha. Okay. Because there's a scene later where it very much felt like he was the mayor.
Yeah.
And so I was like, clearly this can't like be his name, but that's all he's credited as.
No, it's a title.
Gotcha. Okay. So he brings flowers for Elizabeth, and even he's asking about the wedding. So this wedding is clearly a big deal for the town, right? Mm-hmm. If the mayor himself is coming in. And this is where Baron says, unless Henry comes to his senses, there will be no wedding. And he's like, this has been, he's kept us waiting long enough, and he needs to come home. He's like, if there is another woman, I'm going to go find her. And so he leaves. So he's on the hunt for this other woman. Mm-hmm. And then we're back to the lab, and Dr. Waldman and Henry are sitting together. Waldman's just trying to tell him how dangerous this is. And this is where Henry kind of gives them the mad scientist spiel, but also, I don't know, relatable for people who, love the idea of the unknown and they want to uncover the secrets. He just kind of says, where would we be if no one tries to find out what lies beyond, Right. And he basically says like, people may call me crazy, but I'm okay with that if I can even discover just a little bit of, infinity, as he says it. But basically he's saying like, I'm okay with being called crazy if I can unlock essentially the secrets of the universe or whatever, the secrets to life, the secrets to godlyhood. He's okay with that.
It would justify it for him.
Exactly. Exactly. And this is where it's revealed. This is where Henry tells Waldman, like, it's your brain we stole. And so you should be excited too, kind of thing. And this is where Waldman's like, oh, well, the brain that was stolen from me was a criminal brain, And so Henry does have a moment of, he's like, oh shit, because for a moment he still thought it was the normal brain.
Now there's like a shadow of doubt, basically.
Yep. So you see that come over him, but then he, the wheels turn. He justifies it to himself. Mm-hmm. He's like, no matter, it's going to work, right? It's almost like I'm in too deep now. Like it has to work because it can't not.
Yeah, there's no going back.
Exactly. So he's like, no matter, it'll be fine. And this is where you get the first look at Frankenstein's monster. Still really well done though, and I'm sure in 1931 this was like, oh fuck, look at this thing.
Oh yeah, I mean it's still effective now. So. And
he does explain, though, they want to bring him in because they explain like he's been kept in darkness. He hasn't seen light yet. And, I'm sure it's metaphorical, but he's also quite literally like he hasn't seen the sunlight yet. And so the whole idea is they bring him in this room and he opens a window to like reveal the sunlight to him. And, we see the monster. He's very intrigued by it. He stands up, he puts his arms up, to feel the heat of the sun. And he's very much like, I dig this. I dig this sunlight. But then they have him close the blinds and they make him, sit back down. And this is where Fritz comes running in with a fucking torch. Just like, and it seems out of nowhere because he's clearly like taunting the monster with it. But like no setup to it. But then later it's explained that they hadn't been getting along, like the monster and Fritz. But this is also just a setup that we establish he doesn't like fire. He's afraid of fire, and it starts the ripple effect of what's going to cause the monster to break out.
There's a lot of ham-fisted kind of moments like that in those older movies where they're just like, we got to get this point across. How do we do it? I don't know. Just have him running with a torch.
Yeah.
We'll explain it later, or people will figure it out by the time we get to where we want to be or something.
Right. Exactly.
Like if he goes enough times, they'll be like, oh wait, he doesn't like fire. That's why he freaked out earlier.
The three of them have to pin him down and they tie him up and they put him back in his room, which looks like a dungeon almost, or like a prison cell. But And then we see Fritz alone with him. Just again, he's like whipping him with a whip. So again, more establishing
As you will.
as you will. Establishing their dynamic is not a good one. And then he's swiping the torch in his face and he's laughing at him and he's teasing him.
Might be some shit going on.
What's up?
He needs a safe
Hey,
word.
whatever, man. You know, I don't judge.
The relationship isn't a good one. Well, maybe it's not that bad. I don't know.
Yeah, we don't know.
We don't know.
But we hear an off-screen scream from Fritz, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Henry and Waldman, they run in and we see Fritz has been hung. So the monster has hung Fritz. Fritz is dead. R.I.P.
Mm-hmm. Fritz was hung.
What's up?
I said Fritz was hung.
Fritz was hung. Yeah. That also could go into the dynamic. I don't know. They got too close to the sun, though. You know?
I know not of which you speak, sir.
So at this point, they lock the monster in the room. Like they run out. He tries to break out, but they get him locked in the room. And this is where Waldman's like, "You need to kill this thing. Like this is going too far." But instead, Henry gets like some chloroform, like a shot of chloroform or something. I think it was described. And they want to sedate the monster. You know, so they let him kind of come out. Henry has a torch in his hand, and then Waldman is sort of behind him and injects him with it. With the shot, he gets knocked out. The monster and Henry struggle. So the monster's starting to choke Henry, and he's about to kill him. But then, thankfully, the drug kicks in and knocks the monster out. Yeah. So yeah. And just then, and there's a knock on the door, and Victor comes running in. And he's sort of panicked, like your father's on his way. Elizabeth and them are heading up to the house right now. So they, he helps them rush to like hide the monster. Mm-hmm. And Baron comes in demanding to see his son. And this is when Waldman advises him, like, you need to get Henry out of here, dude. Like shit is unhinged, So Baron and Elizabeth go up to Henry's lab and he like just passes out on the ground. Right. So Victor and Waldman now run up as Elizabeth yells and they put him on the bed. They lay him down. And so Baron, like, I insist you come home and, get well. And Waldman kind of looks at Henry and is like, I'll make sure that the thing gets taken care of, essentially saying like, I'll dispose of the monster, as they take Henry home. And then, so now we're at a scene. So a lot, again, I went through that really fast, but it kind of happens that fast, a lot of parts of this movie just kind of go by you real. Because again, this movie is only an hour and 10 minutes long. And right. I was surprised how much actually happens for an hour-long movie.
Well, it's because that's how they do it. They fucking jump from scene to scene without, barely explaining something or,
Yeah, like that whole beat, how I just talked through all that is pretty much how fast it plays out.
Yeah. Like I said, man, film is expensive.
Yeah, they're like, all right, let's get this going. Yep. So then we see Waldman alone with the monster on operation table, and he's sort of examining him, doing doctory shit. And then we slowly see like the hand behind him, kind of approach and grab him. So the monster's awake because, while this is happening, his eyes are flickering, showing that he's waking up. And, Waldman's oblivious doing his thing, and he gets caught in chokehold. And so now Waldman's dead. Monster walks out the front door, and we cut to now there's a scene. Henry and Elizabeth are sitting outside at Henry's house. This very nice, what are those things called? We're going to have to cut this because it's going to drive me crazy.
A gazebo?
Yeah, gazebo. So let's try that again. So Henry and Elizabeth are sitting outside on a gazebo.
In a gazebo.
What did I say? On?
You said on a gazebo.
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 Henry and Elizabeth are sitting outside on a gazebo. I also can't say jaguar, so do you want to make fun of me for that?
What did you say?
Yeah, I said I can't say jaguar. I add a. I was someone recently. Yeah, jaguar? someone recently made fun of me for that. Yeah,
jaguar.
Yeah, I know. Yes.
Well, I mean, to be fair, the wife makes fun of me if I say jaguar. So,
how's it said then? Because that's what I was told.
Because she's European and she learned British English, so therefore it's supposed to be jaguar.
That's worse than both.
It is. I agree. Okay.
Oh man, where are we at? Where are we?
I don't
Where are
know.
we going with this? So
Jaguar.
okay, so what is it?
We're
So Henry
in
and
the
Elizabeth are
gazebo.
sitting
We're
on
in
a
the
what?
gazebo. We're in the gazebo.
A gazebo. Did I get it?
You got it.
They're sitting on that thing, in that thing, and he's telling her it's heaven to be with her. So clearly at this point, Henry's the clouds kind of gone from his mind, and he's like, "Whoa, that was kind of crazy, huh? I kind of let's just move past it." Like literally, he's just like, "How about we just go get married?" And crazy times, right? Like,
Yeah.
what was I thinking? And then now this is the part that but again, it's an hour-long movie, so things got to move fast because literally the next scene they're now at their wedding celebration.
Mm-hmm.
But like the monster just escaped, so the motherfuckers got a wedding going that fast, But
Yeah, man.
they do seem very wealthy. So we get to the next scene. We are introduced to this cute little girl, Maria. Don't get attached. She's talking to her father. Kind of asking her father, "Hey, come play with me," and they live right by this lake, and he's like, "Oh, I got work to do, go play, be safe." She runs down right by their lake. She's picking some flowers, and the monster kind of shows up behind some branches and stuff and some trees and walks up to her. And this just shows the innocence of a child because she kind of just walks right up to him, no hesitation, and was like, "Oh, hi, who are you? Like, my name's Maria. Do you want to come play with me?" And she kind of takes his hand and they go sit down by the lake, and it starts as actually, this is what makes the scene so like, oh shit, because it starts as such a nice, beautiful scene, and even what comes is such a misunderstanding that it's like damn, dude, like it just sucks.
Because it goes to the whole point that there was nobody there to actually teach him right from wrong or anything like that because he was abandoned
exactly
by his creator. So
yep. So she hands him a flower, and he's like the first time we see him smile in the whole movie, like he's showing genuine joy. So he takes a flower, and she says something like, "I can make a boat." And she starts picking the flowers from their stems and throws it in the water, and it's floating. And the monster gets really excited by this, so he does it too, and he sees, oh look, they're floating, and they're laughing. And this is where it kind of takes the turn, but he sees that and he picks up Maria because he wants to see her float,
right,
like the flowers. So
he's playing.
He's playing, exactly. He's having a good time. He's laughing. He's playing. So he's like, "Oh, this is fun." Picks her up. Because again, this is his first time seeing water. So to his mind, oh, you throw things on top of the water, So he throws her in the water, and then he realizes, oh shit, she's she's not coming back up, right? So he panics and runs away. And when I first saw the film for the first time, because that's where the scene ends, I thought he just ran away, was scared. Surely didn't think they'd commit to the bit, but as we'll see in a little bit, they committed to the bit. I thought Maria was fine. I was rooting for Maria, spoilers if you haven't caught on, she doesn't make it.
You'd think that if you grew up by a lake or something, you'd know how to swim, but yeah.
Apparently, by the way, this scene, because we're talking about again for the times, this scene was actually censored in some places, so some of the movies didn't have this scene.
I believe it.
Yeah, and I can get it too. Even now, like it was shocking. Like there's a few things in movies that are unsettling to me. Obviously, killing animals, and children. It's just two things you don't really want to see,
Right. Well, it kind of goes to the whole the innocence thing or something. They went there
in 1931. So
ballsy move.
Ballsy move, yeah. So now we're back to the wedding celebration, and Elizabeth comes out and is like, "Henry, I must talk to you," and she's almost got this sort of Sixth Sense action going on, where she's just like, "I'm worried something's going to happen. Weldman hasn't showed up to the wedding yet. He's late." Because again, we got to speed through things, and now we need an explanation that they need to find out that Weldman's dead somehow, right? So, like right when she's explaining this, Henry's trying to calm her down, like everything's cool, but Henry's going to run in, or Victor, sorry, is going to run in and be like, "Yeah, so Weldman's dead and the monster's loose." And conveniently, right then, they hear the monster kind of moan or yell, whatever he does. So they run upstairs to try to find him. They run down to the cellar, and he locks he locks Elizabeth in a room because why not? He's like, you stay here. Like, but as luck would have it, that's where the monster shows up. He climbs through the window of the room that Elizabeth has now been locked in. And he tries to get her. So not quite sure the motivation on that one.
Probably like just emulating King Kong. I don't know.
Yeah, because so far, like, all the deaths he's done haven't just been in like cold blood.
Well,
maybe
again, it's probably because of the adaptation of it, but they were still adapting the story, and
of course
the story is that the monster requested a bride. So they may not have. I forget if they even hinted at any of that in the movie, but that was probably their way of kind of alluding to, like, he wants her now because
that's a good point, because he doesn't actually kill her, because we'll see when
he wants a companion.
So maybe he was just trying to take her.
Yeah, he was trying to take her. He wanted a companion because, again, that is actually in the book. So the movie trying to run through, like, speed race through everything or whatever, they probably just did that to kind of allude to it, but also because it's kind of, again, like with King Kong, it's the classic trope for the time, with like the monster trying to steal the beautiful damsel in distress, and then, like, the men folk coming in to save her and stuff like that,
right,
and battle the monster, good versus evil. And
so it was almost like, now we always have our movie cliches, and that was the movie cliche of the time. So it's like,
I mean, it's not even just at a time. I mean, they still make movies like that, but
yeah, true,
which is fine. I got no problem with that. It's kind of like that's just classic storytelling. That shit goes back hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, thousands of years, with old story folk tales and shit like that.
Right.
The knight rescuing the chick from the dragon and all that kind of stuff. So it's the same thing. It's the monster trying to steal the girl who is looked at as, helpless, whatever, in need of protection. And so then the men go and fight the monster, fight the evil, and save the girl. And there you go. Yeah. Everybody but the monster is happy.
There it is. So the men break in, they see her on the bed. So, like, for a second, they kind of psych you out thinking she's dead, but she's not. And then we cut. So this is where we cut to Maria's father carrying her through the town. And this is where I was like, oh shit, okay, so they committed to the bit. We're just seeing this wet, lifeless body of this little girl. And that was heavy, man. Like I said, like, most of this movie I watch, and it's fun and it's well done. But it's a 1930s black and white Universal monster film, so it's kind of like, But for some reason, that one, it's like, oh shit, like, this is dark,
Yeah.
And it does parallel that, or it's that sort of thing of, fuck, like, yeah, this is, you would see why the town would be in an uproar, but you as the audience know, like, it was innocence. He didn't know any better, but he did still kill her.
And he's incapable of defending himself and saying that it was an accident. So that makes him, he's an easy target.
Exactly. So this is where they go to the, how do you say it again? The Burgomeister. Attaboy. This makes me hungry, bro.
Yeah, I know. It's the magic of German words, man.
Yeah, dude. He's like, well, what do you want me to? It's like, sorry. It's funny because he's like, damn, dude, that sucks. But what do you want from me, bro? Because he's like, my daughter drowned, and he's like, sucks. But why are you bringing this to me? And he's like, because she was murdered. And then he's like, oh shit, okay, on it,
Right. Yeah, it's not just because you were a bad parent. It's because somebody, murdered her or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So then we get a funny scene. Not fun. It's just, again, just the writing of it to me.
Yeah.
Henry is like, I gotta go in this. He's like, I built this thing with my hands. I'll finish it with my hands, But he tells Victor, like, you must watch after Elizabeth now. But he's like telling Victor, like, she's yours now, kind of thing. It was weird. Like, whatever happens to me, take care of her.
Yeah, you look after her.
Yeah.
But again, that's a product of the time. That was a pretty common thing.
Okay, Fair enough.
Yeah, well, I
Yeah.
mean, like a brother got a wife or something, and then the brother dies, and then the other brother is like, "Hey, I'm going to take care of the wife," and there you go.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's how cousins are made.
So now we have the angry mob, right? We got the classic mob with torches and pitchforks, and everyone's out there looking for the
And it's a
monster.
great scene too.
It
All
is.
the
All
torches
the
and the
stuff
back
leading
end.
up
Yeah,
to it is
yeah,
great.
it's a
The
great,
way it was
great
shot.
looking shot. Yeah.
Yep.
Very, very classic, and
The whole
kind of-
ending is great.
yeah, it evokes all the things that are great about that classic era of cinema and stuff. Because even with it being a horror movie or whatever you want to call it, or some sci-fi movie, whatever, I don't think that was even a term or whatever back then. But it's like it's still kind of like you watch any kind of old like Hammer horror movie, and they're always going to try to sneak in some shot of like that castle with the townsfolk with pitchforks and torches and shit like that. It all goes back to like I think that shot in Frankenstein, that whole ending sequence, which
Right.
is really cool. It's like a lot of atmosphere and stuff. It's really cool.
Absolutely. And Henry is actually like leading the mob or one of the mobs. So he's in it. He's in there, and then he gets separated from the mob at one point, and they're like running up a hill, and he's like, "No, this way, this way." And the monster's there, of course, hiding behind a rock, and so they scuffle and they fight, and the monster overpowers Henry, and this is where he picks him up and drags him to the windmill. This sort of abandoned I don't know if it's abandoned, but no one's there right now. This is like abandoned windmill.
Windmill.
Wind. Am I saying that wrong too? Look,
What'd you say? Say it.
Windmill.
Windmill.
Is that wrong?
Windmill.
What am I saying?
You sound like you said windmill.
Yeah.
Windmill.
Windmill. Meal. Is that wrong?
Mill. Windmill.
Mill.
Yeah, mill.
Windmill.
Yeah, because you keep saying like a meal. It's like a windmill. I'm like,
how I
he
say
is
it, man.
hungry.
You know what?
He said
Like-
Burgermeister 3 times. My man's hungry now. He's like, windmill.
Oh man, I say things wrong. Like, listen, that's what I was. Yeah. Anyways, so they
Like,
go
"Dude, you
there.
hungry? We can take a
Yeah.
break, man. Get a sandwich. Yeah.
Anyway, so the mob
Mm.
surrounds this windmill.
Windmill.
Yeah. Well, what do you want from me, man? You want me to
No,
talk normal, or do you want me to say it right?
I just wanted to be sure I heard what I heard. Is all. That's all.
Okay. So they get to the windmill,
Yes.
and
The happy mill.
yeah, the happy windmill, and so Henry wakes up and he's trying to escape, and this is pretty gnarly shot. So he throws him over the balcony,
Mhm.
and he lands on the rotating windmill. It looked very painful when he did it, but it actually breaks his fall, so he doesn't die. And so they have some of the people take him back to the village, they say, and to give him some care. And then they set. This is where they, so we're coming into the end of the movie here. They set fire. See, now I'm self-conscious saying windmill every time, dude.
Oh,
like
stop
I
it.
don't want to say it. I don't want to
Stop.
say it.
Stop.
The
it.
wind.
Get over it.
Yeah. So they set fire to the windmill, and
That's right.
and God, dude, it's like it invokes the emotions, because it's like it's a very well done. Like the actor, like he's screaming, he's afraid, and everyone's cheering, and he basically like that's where it ends. Is it sets up a blaze. As far as we know, the monster is destroyed. As sequels will tell us, he's not. But for now, we don't know. We get to the final scene of the movie. Is a bunch of these like nurses are taking this like wine, like his great grandmother's wine. They're like, we thought Henry could use some wine, and I thought it was just funny because the dad like pours a glass. He's like, nah, Henry don't need it, but I'll drink it. And it just ends with this shot of his father saying like, here's to the house of Frankenstein, and then it fades out to the end. So that's Frankenstein, everybody. Now we're gonna move into the segment I like to call "Gonna Have Me Some Fun."
I'm gonna have me some fun. I'm gonna have me some fun.
gonna have me some fun. I'm gonna have me some fun. I'm gonna have me some fun. First, I'd actually just like to just get into our thoughts personally of, do we think can this be considered a science fiction story or not? And I'm going to let Carlos give his thoughts first. Carlos, do you think you would consider this a science fiction story?
I would definitely say it's pretty close to the mark. I mean, you've got the idea of science being used in a way to as a means to a particular end that is not necessarily something that is actually worth pursuing or good to pursue, because like I said earlier, the ramifications of that are not maybe considered thoroughly. So there's the ideas of, if you really want to it might take a little bit of a stretch, but you could almost look at the creation of the monster as kind of like organ transplants and things like that. And that wasn't being done at the time. So in a way, it's kind of foreshadowing where medical science would eventually go to where we are now, where you can replace kidneys, replace hearts, whatever. So there's that end of it. The bringing a dead person back to life thing, not yet. But if you think scientists and doctors and stuff aren't trying to find a way to do that in some capacity, then you'd be deluding yourself. So it does foreshadow a lot of stuff where medicine and science have eventually gone to since that time. So yeah, I would say it's definitely, it falls into the parameters of science fiction, definitely more than science fantasy. So
that I absolutely agree with. Yeah.
I know you don't really seem to think so entirely, but
here's my thoughts with it. Everything you said, I agree with, right? And I'd be stupid not to, because it's not an opinion, it's fact. That's what happens, But to me, that's not like, I don't consider this what we think of in the traditional sense of science fiction, because just because something happens in a story doesn't mean it's that kind of story, and so there are elements of this, yes, but to me this isn't a science fiction story, because the science fiction side of it all plays very minimal into the whole grand scheme of the story itself. It falls definitely more into a more gothic literature, horror, and the means to bring the creation to life was science fiction. But I don't know, when we think of science fiction, I don't know. I don't think this is it, personally.
Yeah, because like I said,
they are the elements.
Yeah,
but there's more to me. There's more to it. If there's a science, so when I say this next part, but there are science fiction films that could border into other genres. And sure, we could call things like The Thing sci-fi horror, sure. But just because there's a sprinkle of a genre, it's not always that genre. Like, I don't know. So
yeah, I mean, I don't consider, like I said before, I don't consider Star Wars as science fiction.
Right.
So just because there's spaceships and lasers and shit like that, it doesn't mean that it's science fiction. But science fiction, to me, doesn't always have to deal with spaceships and lasers. It's always,
I agree.
It's like always some type of, again, like a cautionary tale. It's about where we're headed as a society, and that can be broken down, whether you look at it in terms of technology or in terms of the political culture or whatever. But there's always like something where on the other side of the fence you're not taking into consideration. So Frankenstein, she may not have written it with the idea of science in mind or something like that, but all the hallmarks of real science fiction are in it. They're just wrapped in gothic horror,
right?
Basically.
Yeah, and again, I don't disagree with that. I can't disagree with that, because that's fact. She did that.
Whether intentional or not, who knows? But
Right. I do believe it was not intentional, because that's the whole idea of if if it's the first and she invented, quote, the genre, it's like she wasn't here like, I'm going to do this thing called science fiction.
Right.
Like she was just writing the story, and that's
right.
what
She might not have had like a burning interest about all things scientific and said, you know what, now's a perfect chance for me to write a book or or to write a story that centers on this. I don't think that was the case. I mean, wasn't it like a storytelling contest or something like that? You know what I mean? Like
right.
with, Lord Byron or some shit. So I don't think that was the case, but I think that there's enough of the actual hallmarks of real science fiction. There's enough of them in the story that's just wrapped in a gothic horror, kind of outfit, that I personally think it would be science fiction. Shut up, cat.
I was hearing something. It didn't click.
Yeah,
Cat, but,
he's got separation anxiety, and I haven't played with him for a couple hours. So
the novel was categorized as Gothic fiction. Critics argue that it fits more neatly into the Gothic tradition.
Sure,
which, yes,
the framework of it, sure.
Yeah, but to say someone didn't invent something because there was a lack of an establishment of that thing, it's like, but that's what inventing it is.
Right.
So,
right.
So,
yeah, if somebody invents it, you can't say they didn't invent it because it wasn't invented before. That's dumb.
Yeah.
I get the category thing though, because like sometimes if there wasn't already enough precedent to call something specific,
right,
it would get lumped into a different category. A lot of times they did that, not to go off on off the rails, but one like the one example of that always kind of makes me laugh is like the movie The Exorcist is not labeled as horror, it's labeled as drama.
Interesting.
So, right, because that come out in 1973 or 73. And so horror as a genre in movies wasn't necessarily a thing. There was monster movies, there were thrillers and stuff like that, but there wasn't horror. And so The Exorcist come out and they're like, well, this is way too serious to just be considered, like, it's not a monster movie. So they labeled it as drama. That's what I'm saying. Like for something like Frankenstein, there may not have been when she wrote that, there wasn't that genre to lump it into. But
of course,
Gothic literature was prominent, and so therefore it would get lumped in with that category, I would say.
Right. Exactly. Could we call it sci-fi Gothic literature? Is that a thing?
I mean, it would be, if you can find me another example of Gothic sci-fi, I would say, sure, it's a legit category.
The thing I keep going back to myself is just how are you defining the genre? Is really, to me, is just because there's that little element of science fiction.
Yeah.
Is it science fiction?
Well, again, we touched on that before. It's like, just because it has a spaceship in it doesn't make it science fiction.
Yeah. But there's a lot of things that you said that I actually do like, and they're good arguments that I haven't been heard before. Like you even went as far as like mentioning like this was sort of a precursor to almost organ donors, you know, like,
organ transplants,
like, you're not wrong. Like to me, that's a good argument. I'll take it.
fucking skin grafts. You know what I mean? They
dude,
shit like that back then. So,
exactly.
I think it's science fiction. That's me.
Right. Whether Frankenstein is the first science fiction story depends on how one defines the genre. If science fiction is understood as a literature that speculates on the possibility of science and technology, then Frankenstein is a good candidate. However, if science fiction requires a focus on technological innovation, rigorous scientific grounding, or an established genre framework, but see, then it goes back to the established thing. Like, and I think that's what these people are missing is like, we're not like, you can't invent something that's established,
right?
So,
right,
yeah.
And again, it's like if you're trying to find a way to categorize things, then yeah, it makes perfect sense. But if a category hasn't been invented yet, you can't exclude it from that category just because that category doesn't exist yet. If somebody created a new category,
if the only argument you can come up with is, well, it's not following the established genre, it's like, because there wasn't one. That's what we're discussing. Did Frankenstein create it? If it created it, there wouldn't be an established fucking framework.
Right.
So, and we're not even saying, I don't even think the topic here is, did Frankenstein create it? Because no, but was it like by accident? Was it the first? You know?
Was it intentional? Was it set out intentionally to create a new genre? No,
Right.
I don't think so.
But
did it inadvertently create a genre, or
you know what
inadvertently become the first novel in a genre?
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah.
Like, what you could even say is, once science fiction became what it was, you were able to go back and be like, oh, well, shit, that's what she did.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
because now there's a genre that this fits in, when before it didn't.
Right.
So you could, that's an argument I could get behind of, no, it didn't create science fiction, but it wasn't trying to.
Right.
But once science fiction became a thing, you can't look at Frankenstein and be like, yeah, see, through this podcast, I may have changed my own mind. Right on. Because you got to call it what it is, man.
Yep.
And because that's always been my and that's always been my argument, is like, when I think of what science fiction is, not that it has to be spaceships, not that it has to be in space, but it's like, I never considered Frankenstein it, because it's got its little moments, but the core of the story isn't that. But when you look at it more of like, it's not trying to be science fiction, it wasn't trying to create science fiction, but now that science fiction exists, and you go back and look at everything that's happened in Frankenstein, what's there is there. You can't wiggle around that.
Right.
The science fiction exists within the story.
Yep.
So shit. Right on. We got there. I'm
there.
A believer now. I'm a believer in Mary.
How about it?
How about it?
Wild trip.
Yeah, you guys saw this in real time, by the way, for the record. I came into this podcast like, nah, man. But when you really kind of break things down, it is what it is. So
let's get into the book versus movie and talk about the differences and the comparisons and everything with all that. So admittedly, I hadn't read the book before, but I started doing some research for it. And Carlos, when you were talking, I know you're familiar with the book, and you were telling about the 1994 film that was really a little closer to the book. So I did watch that, and I've read a lot of things online about the book. First thing I'm going to say offhand is it is just a far superior story than the 1931 film. I feel you would agree.
I mean, it adheres to the actual book much better.
Yeah. Oh, and I mean, just the book in general. So we're going to just talk about like 5 major differences, because I feel like we could spend another hour on the book itself, and we unfortunately don't have that kind of time. But before we get into that, I'm going to try to summarize, and you can probably help me because you're more familiar with just major overall story view. Because as you mentioned prior, I mean, there's parts where it takes parts in the Arctic. There's even a character you don't see in the 1931 film at all. I got his name here somewhere. Captain Walton.
Yep.
Right. Who's I forget exactly
leading the expedition or something, right?
Yeah, I forget what his expedition is, but he runs into Henry or Victor in the story, and we'll talk about that difference and why they changed the name, who is actually pursuing the creature in the Arctic to destroy it, right? And the book flip-flops. It goes from the narrative of Victor telling the story to the captain, and then the creature telling his story to Victor. So it's kind of told in almost 3 different point of views, right? The captain's, Victor's, and then the creature.
Yeah.
And the creature himself in the novel is a way more captivating character as well. Yep. He's actually intelligent, Again, so it's just, I don't know. I'm excited to go quote, read, listen, whatever to it.
There's a lot more to unpack from
exactly,
not just in general, but from the various narratives, like you were saying too, because there's a whole. There's a whole underlying deep level of philosophy and stuff, about not just about good and evil or right and wrong, but also man's responsibility to man, and all that kind of stuff. And all the underlying themes about, should you, like, just because you can doesn't mean you should, like Jurassic Park or something.
I was just gonna say Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah.
And that's the thing too, is like, I know, like, we touched on things when watching the movie, like the final scene with the windmill.
Got
it. Yeah. Like that was a very, traumatic scene, and you felt bad for the creature and stuff, but just watching the 1994 film, reading up what I have about the novel, dude, like the sorrow and pity you felt for the creature. Like, poor dude didn't ask for this.
Right.
And every turn, every which way, just keeps getting hit and screwed, and people don't. It's just like, can the guy get a break, please? Just one little, like.
Yeah, but despite all that, still wanting to, like, be a part of things.
Yep. Yeah, and so I don't know.
It's like he's still kind of like that. There's still that desire for, like, an outreach to be a part of humanity and stuff, even though he keeps getting shunned and attacked and everything else. But yeah.
I mean, I can't say it any other way. It's just, I just think it's a better story. But things I'm going to talk about on my list of, like, differences is there's reasons why they did what they did, and for the times it makes sense.
Sure.
Maybe people weren't ready for that kind of story as a film. But we're going to kind of go through some 5 key differences. We'll start with the creation process. So this was interesting. I know we talked about during the breakdown of the movie, we couldn't really remember what Mary Shelley did. But in the actual novel, she keeps it very vague. She doesn't really explain what Victor does, right? And she more focused on, so it was unspecified scientific means, and she more, again, was emphasizing the ethical and philosophical implications rather than the science itself. So I could see this in the argument of, is it science fiction or not, because even she's super vague on the science stuff. We've talked about that already. You just heard all that. So again, make up your own mind. But I think for her the important things were Frankenstein did it, and a big difference in the book is he immediately regrets it. Whereas in the 31 film, he kind of eventually comes around to it. But in this, it's like, oh fuck, what have I done?
Well, yeah, that's the famous line, even from the 94 movie or 95 or whatever, right? Like, as soon as it happens or whatever, and he realizes the implications of what just happened, he's like, what have I done? So,
by the way, just a sidebar, the 94 film, when he creates the monster, don't eat lunch during that.
It's a little gooey.
It's a little gooey. There's a lot of naked Robert De Niro, and you see full dong. So
I mean, which is fair.
It is fair. I just wasn't ready for it. Hey, Robert De Niro on your dong, no offense, man. It's glorious, man. But I wasn't ready for it. And like you said, it's a little gooey.
It is a little gooey.
Yeah. But in the 1931 film, he's brought to life, as we know, using electricity from a dramatic lightning storm, in the laboratory. And so we do see a more, it's not as vague as in the book. So in the book, it's more like Frankenstein created this or invented this way to bring him to life, and that you don't know how, you don't know what. There it is, right? So
I think it wasn't like electricity was just like almost like a minor part of it or something. It was like that and a bunch of other vagaries or something else that was kind of vague or something.
Yeah. A lot of vague.
Vague.
Yeah. Yep. And so why the change, right? And as you do more of these sort of book to film comparisons, you figure out a lot of, like, they're different mediums. They have to do things differently. You can't always do the same, right? So they needed a dramatic, cinematic way to do this. If it was just like, hey, I thought of this way, oh, it's alive, that's boring to watch. No one wants to go see that. I would argue this was a good way to do it. I mean, the scene's iconic. It's, people mock it all the time, people reference it, it's alive, so thrilling, otherworldly, whatever.
Well, that's the thing, like you said, there's visual and like novels and movies are two completely different mediums, so you have to be able to all the things that you can't properly get across from the page to the screen, you have to find ways to make it equally exciting visually, since you don't have like your imagination to rely on, what you're reading and stuff to create that image in your head. So how do you take something that you're reading it may seem like it's like, whoa, but how do you make that, on screen, like explode and make everybody in the theater go, whoa. So
quite literally make it explode with lightning.
Right. Exactly. So, I don't know, electricity and shit, sparks.
Yeah. And
thunderstorms. It's spectacle. It's all spectacle.
Yeah. And I don't know. I feel like even in 31, obviously electricity had been around a while, but still the idea of, we create things with electricity, right? Lights and all this stuff. So the idea of this power that we don't fully understand of lightning and thunder and these scary storms.
Well, that's
it worked. It was effective,
right? Because a thunderstorm is, it's like a primordial kind of experience or something, especially if you're, a non-advanced peoples or whatever. So you would hide in your caves or your huts or whatever when there was a massive thunderstorm because you didn't know what the hell was going on. It was, the power of the gods, right?
Yep.
And that's kind of mirroring the whole idea of this, which is bringing someone to life. It's the power of the gods. So that the thunderstorm aspect of it is almost kind of like it ties in as a backdrop, but also as part of the whole theme of, this is godlike powers happening.
Yep, absolutely. The creature's characterizations. So this is, and I kind of briefly said in the beginning of this, but in the novel, he's intelligent, articulate, he's capable of deep emotional thought, right? He learns to speak, he educates himself, and
I was going to say not at first, but he gets there.
Exactly, he gets there because he goes on a whole soul-searching journey on his own, right? And there's even a time, he debates philosophical issues with Victor.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, in the movie, he's more portrayed as mute, childlike, with very limited intelligence, right?
Right.
His violent behavior is shown as instinctive rather than a response to the social rejection. Because again, in the book, he does have violent moments, but it's not from instinct. It's just survival. I mean, it's kind of instinctual, but there are even moments, there's some part in the book where he I think he seeks revenge on Victor.
Mm-hmm.
He's for creating him, abandoning him, what have you.
For abandoning him,
yeah. So those are choices he made, not instinctual. And I even said that when we talked about when we were breaking down the movie, right? The 3 deaths in the movie. One's accidental, right? The girl, and then 2 of them are just instinctual, like fight or flight. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And so that's some big differences there. Why the changes, right? So again, touching on the times, in the 30s was the big universal, it was just the start of the universal monsters, right? People were drawn to horrors for the thrills and the scares, and maybe the idea of a highly intelligent philosophical creature wouldn't have really been what they want. They wanted a monster, right? They wanted someone to be afraid of, not someone to sit down with Victor and have deep thoughts.
Right. Yeah.
Also time constraints, as you mentioned a lot when talking about the movie, right? This movie's an hour and 10 minutes. We got to go.
Film is expensive.
Yep. So there's no time to develop this character arc of this creature, right? So showing him as mute, instinctively violent was much quicker to establish as a threat, right? We got to make this thing a threat right now. We don't have time to get him there, essentially, right?
And I mean, keep in mind too that this was still also the equivalent of a, what would nowadays be considered like a horror movie, and horror movies typically are low budget. Right. So they're not going to throw a whole crazy amount of money at what is essentially a monster movie or a horror movie. I mean, now it's a little bit different when, you go to see a freaking Godzilla movie or, something like that. Yeah, sure. But for back in the time, this was just, this was going to be a small scale monster movie that they just, try to, whatever, they tried to take all the major beat points of a novel and make it a little bit more palatable for the time period and for the audience that they knew would be watching it, hopefully. But regardless of anything, it was still probably considered low budget, for other compared to other movies at the time and stuff. And so film is expensive. So there you go.
Exactly.
Make it short. Make it short. Have 3 main people.
Exactly. So number 3, and this is one, if you're not confused yet, because I've switched to calling him Victor, but Victor Frankenstein's name, as Carlos again mentioned earlier, right? We're calling him Henry as we talk about the film. They changed it to Henry, and the reason is pretty simple. They felt for the time Victor was a more aggressive name for the audience, and they thought Henry would be someone people would root for more.
Right.
That's quite literally it. Henry just felt like a safer name to go with than Victor.
It's funny when they do that stuff, there's like dumb studio decisions like that.
But then they make his friend Victor, but whatever, but they want the main character though to have a more friendly, approachable name. And that's quite literally why they changed it. And then, so number 4, moral, philosophical themes are different, right? In the novel, the story is a deep exploration of human ambition, dangers of playing God, the consequences of neglecting the moral responsibility. The focus is as much on Victor's internal struggles as it is on the creature's journey, as we mentioned, right? The film focuses more on horror, spectacle, leaving out much of the novel's moral and philosophical depth. There's still a little, but it's really in passing of quick conversations, right?
Right.
The emphasis is on the monstrosity of the creature and like terror.
It's more of an afterthought than actually like one of the core themes, and elements and stuff.
I still think they did a good job with it. Like I think the scene with the girl really worked well. Like I don't know, for such a short scene, they did a lot.
It was impactful.
It worked. So they made it work.
But that's what sold the idea of the general thing that they were trying to get across with the movie. So that's why the scene works so good, is because it's like if you had to boil down this whole movie to literally one scene to try to get somebody interested at the time to go see it, that would be the scene.
Yep. Yeah.
You'd be like, holy shit, what happens? I got to see what happens.
Well, like I said, even me, how many years later, I was like, surely she's fine. And then you see the scene of the dad holding her in the, during the celebration. It's like, oh, okay, they committed to the bit. Then lastly, for our list here, because again, we could talk for another hour and a half of all the differences, because they're quite literally just completely different stories, if you really think about it. So we're just talking on a few things here. The creature's appearance, in the novel, he's described as grotesque, but not the green skin, bolted necked figure that we see in the movie. Also in the novel, he's like 8 feet tall, and the reason for that, they touched on that, is again in the vague science of Victor Frankenstein, he had to make the creature taller or else it wouldn't survive whatever sort of experiment he was doing. So the height was important to the creation of this creature.
Just the overall like enlarged size of it.
Exactly, like that. It was required to essentially bring life to the creature. So he's 8 feet tall. He has yellowish skin, again, so the green skin, and he's got watery eyes and black lips, which works because that's sort of how you look when you're dead, right? Your eyes get that sort of watery color, lips go black and stuff. So you're quite literally bringing these dead pieces back to life. So it would make sense, right? And
you're not going to look like a Campbell's soup kid or something. So.
Exactly. And then we all know Frankenstein from 31, right? One of the most iconic monsters in cinema. And the square head, bolts in his neck, the greenish skin, and that's what everyone thinks of Frankenstein.
And there we go.
There it is.
What a good place to end it, man, because where do we go from there? You all saw my mind change in real time.
There it is.
Yep.
That's it, man.
Yeah.
Worth the trip.
Worth the trip. Absolutely.
Worth the trip.
Honestly, with this one, I don't even feel the need to go into the science facts versus science fiction. Like we've got.
I think it kind of covered it all.
That's what I'm saying. Like we kind of went there. So, all right, everyone, that was Frankenstein, 1931. I want to thank Carlos again for being here. On the next episode, we're going to get into Forbidden Planet from 1956, starring Leslie Nielsen, who you probably mostly know from comedies. But so Forbidden Planet was another sort of landmark in the genre of sci-fi, so we'll dive into all that, but we'll save that for that episode. So Carlos, once again, thank you for being here, man. You guys will hopefully Yeah, you guys will hopefully see more of Carlos around here. We'll try to get him on when he's available. But any closing remarks that you got?
Yeah, no, I was gonna say if it's coming out like end of January, then yeah, by that time, I think my band Beholder, we should actually have like an art reveal, and I'm not sure if our first single will be out or not, but if you get a chance and you're into some epic doom metal with some dark power metal elements, check us out. Check out our Facebook page, Beholder Doom. Yay! That's all I got.
Check it out.
Because the only other thing I do is work for you and John.
True.
So I got nothing else, man, right now.
We've taken some years off Carlos, but it's okay.
I'm actually only 30.
That's right. Thank you all. Please follow, share, rate the podcast so I can see if you guys actually enjoy me not pronouncing words correctly.
Windmill.
And we'll see you on the next one.
Later.
This is John Yelland, singer of Judicator. Have you heard of Judicator? We're pretty cool, I guess. Every album we do is a concept album that confronts history, mortality, the human condition. We're pretty deep, no big deal. We've made albums about all kinds of cool stuff, like Napoleon Bonaparte, Frederick the Great. Also, my older brother died of cancer, so we wrote an album about that. It was horrible. Don't listen to that album. Seriously, it'll bum you out something fierce. Discover the band redefining American power metal. Find Judicator on Spotify, Bandcamp, or wherever you stream music. Judicator. When you're here, you're family.